Hello everyone and welcome back to ASP.NET Core 1.0. My name is Steve Bishop, and in this video we're going to be talking about using Razor views. So up to this point we've kind of gone over the what's. We've gone over the view components and the partial views and regular views. We've kind of gone over what something is, but we haven't really gone over the so what. What can we do with these views? What can we use them for? How can we work with them together with one another? And so I kind of wanted to put this video together to take some of the things that we've already done and start to use them a bit more effectively like what you would see in the real world. So rather than going on and on about this, I'm just going to go ahead and hop right into a demonstration. So the first thing I want to do is actually make a few changes to our customer's controller to make it line up a little bit more with what you would find out in the real world. And what I mean by that is, for example, we have this index action here, and typically an index action is not going to be an action that goes out and grabs a single entity like this. Typically an index action is for things like listing your customers or some sort of landing page to kind of give the user some idea that they've come to the customers section. Now, since this is actually an action that's going to go and grab a specific customer and display that information to the user, it seems like a more appropriate name for this would be get customer. And that actually falls in line with some of the other names that we've given our methods, like create customer and update customer and delete customer. So get customer makes a lot of sense in this particular context. Now, one other thing I would like to change about this get customer method is that right now it is accepting a customer key as a type of string and comparing it to the customer alternate key value. And really, I don't like this, and that's because if we look at the columns on our dim customer table, we'll notice that the customer key is actually the primary key, whereas customer alternate key just needs to not be null and can be any set of characters up to 15. So this could really be, I think there could be some possible duplicates here, whereas the customer key, we definitely know, since it's the primary key, is always going to be unique. So I'd rather use the key in order to identify a particular customer. So I'm going to change this to customer key. And in doing so, we're going to run into a small problem, and that is that our customer key parameter here is a type of string, whereas now our customer key on our dim customer is an integer. So we should probably change this parameter to be a type of int rather than string, and now we're all set with that. Another method I'd like to change here is the customer list. And remember how I said that typically an index action is going to do something like display a list of entities. Well, that's exactly what we're doing with this customer list method. So why don't we make it our new index action? And this will be the default method that gets run when somebody comes to the customer's controller. Now, along with changing the name of our index action, I no longer want to just go through and get the 999 customers that are listed between 12,000 and 13,000. So I'm just going to get rid of this where method, and that way we're getting all of the customers that are in our database. So now that we've changed these two methods, get customer and index, we need to also change the views that correspond with them, because both of these views, by default, they're not naming, these view methods are not naming which specific view they should be opening. They're just using the default view name. So I need to go here down to our views section, and in our customers subfolder, we need to rename our views. So this customer list now needs to actually be the index, but I can't change it to index yet because there's already one existing. So I actually first need to change our old index view to get customer. So let's do that first. Get customer. And now I can go ahead and rename customer list to index. So now with those changes in place, we can go ahead and run our application and make sure everything works. So now if we go to our customers, and again, the default action is index, so we can just go ahead and just go to customers here. And we can see that John Yang, Eugene Huang, etc. We got our complete list of all of our customers being listed here. Now let's check out a specific customer. Let's make sure we can do a get customer. And it looks like I've already done this once before, so we'll do customer key equals 12,001. And this should give us Sharon Yang. So there we go. Now this isn't particularly convenient to the user, where the user has to know what the URL is that they have to enter in up here, nor are they going to know that they have to use the customer key and give it a value. And they're certainly not going to know which value to pass in here because it's just an ID value that comes from our database. So they're not going to know these things, and it's really quite inconvenient to expect that our users are going to know all this information. So what I'd like to do is, on our list view, I want to add a link on each one of these items that will allow the user to go and view the customer information. So I'm going to go ahead and go back into our application, and I'm going to stop it here. And now I can go ahead and go to my index view, which is doing our iteration through all of our customers. And I'm going to go ahead and get rid of the count because that's no longer necessary. And I'm also going to get rid of the commented out code. And we need to add a link inside of our for each loop so that we have a link for each one of the customers that gets listed. So I'm going to add a new DL, and we'll do DT, and I'm just going to call this options. Okay, and this is where we're going to put options for each particular customer. I'm also going to add a little colon here next to email because it looks like I forgot to do that, and I should make this bold, so I'll go ahead and do that as well. And now for our DD tag, here we're going to just say a view. Okay, so this is going to be a link that I'm going to add into our options section that the user can click on the view link, and that will take them to that particular customer's get customer view. So to do that, I need to add an anchor. So I'm going to do basically a link, a hypertext link. So we're going to do A, and I'm going to use the ASP, the tag helpers here. So we're going to do ASP-controller. And I'm going to set it to customers. And our ASP action is going to be get customer. And now we need to pass in, for our get customer method, we must pass in a customer key, right? And the way that we add a value that will be mapped as a parameter is you use the ASP route attribute, and the route attribute we can add a second hyphen here, and after the second hyphen, the name that we give it will actually be the name of the parameter that we want to assign the value to. So that would be customer key. Okay, so ASP-route-customer key, and the value that I put in here will then be mapped to this parameter called customer key inside of our get customer method. So the value then that we want to pass along would be the items customer key value, and that would be the value that is inside, or the customer key value that is on each one of these items that's being looped through. So now that we have that, we can go ahead and end our anchor tag, and I'm going to move this view inside of our anchor tag and get rid of this extra space here, and we'll save that, and let's go ahead and run our application again. So now when we go to our customers, and this would go again, the default is the index action that's defined by the routing that we had in our startup class. So it's going to customers index action. We can see now we have for each one of our customers an option to click on the view link, and if I click on Ruben Torres view link here, we get redirected to Ruben Torres, and you can see that the URL is exactly what it should be: get customer customer key equals 11,002. So that's good. Our view link is now working. But what else should we probably allow the customer or the user of our application to be able to do? Well, I don't really like the fact that we have all of the information about the customer here, and then we're once again using it in the get customer. So Instead, a list like this should probably be a little bit simpler and not take up so much real estate on the page. So I'm going to go back into our index view, and I'm going to drop some of this that's in here. I'm going to get rid of the phone and email, and I'm going to change this to just name, or customer name sounds better, and I'm going to add first name and last name. And now we can drop this one as well. So now we just get the customer name with our options. And really, I could probably drop this DL as well so that all of these show up in one. Okay, let's save that and let's run it again. So let's take a quick look once again at our customers index view, and let's make sure this looks right. So, okay, yeah, so customer's name, John Huang, and then some options. And we don't even really need the options tag on there, I suppose. We could probably just get rid of that, in fact. And to do that, I'm just going to change this to an NBSP. This is going to add a space. This is HTML code for a space on the page. And I like to do that between tags. I don't like to leave tags empty. I always like to have at least a space, because that will tell some of the different browsers and different like JavaScript languages and stuff that there is actually a value here inside of these tags. If you don't do that, sometimes it can cause problems down the road. So it's just a good idea to get into that habit. And now if we just reload this, we should get rid of that options section, and it should just say view underneath each particular one. And I think that looks a little bit better. And if we just go to Christie's Zoo here, this should now take us, and we can see all of the information about Christie. So I like that a little bit better than I liked having all of the information show up in this list view. So right now the user can view the information, but what about editing it? Well, there's an option here. We could add an edit option on the viewing of the customer, or we could add an edit option here on our list. But really, I think it makes sense in a lot of cases actually, that the viewing of the data could also be mixed with the editing of the data. So what I'm going to do here, this kind of makes things a little simpler and shorter, at least for this demonstration, rather than making a whole other edit customer section. I'm just going to use the same get customer view to allow the user to change the customer information as well as view it. So to do that, I'm going to go ahead and add a form tag, and we're going to do ASP-controller equals customers. Do ASP-action equals, and what do I want this to do? Well, I want this form that I'm going to create using the customer information. I want it to post back to an action that I'm going to call update customer. And I also want to add to this, and this is a good practice to get into, is to do the ASP anti-forgery, okay, and turn that on. And it's actually on by default, but I just kind of want to do this explicitly so that I can remember that I need to add some other things later on in our controller. But we're going to say the ASP anti-forgery is true, and the anti-forgery basically creates a randomized token, an encrypted token, if you will, that is based upon your machine ID and stuff. So that code, that anti-forgery token, will be generated by your machine and then try to be decrypted when it goes and submits the form back to the controller. Your controller will have to decrypt it, and if it can't decrypt it, then it knows that it didn't come from your machine. And that way you can prevent someone creating a website similar to yours and having users go and submit information from their website to yours. And that's what we call cross-site scripting, where someone creates a form or creates something somewhere else that pretends to be like you and ends up accidentally, submitting the wrong information or swiping information from your site on you. So using anti-forgery tokens is a really, really key component to keeping your site secure. Now I need to change these model first names, model last name, model phone, and email address to inputs, because these are actually going to be text boxes that the user is going to be able to not only view the data but also change it. So we're going to do input ASP4, and this input box is going to be for the first name. And notice how we get some really nice IntelliSense from this. I just love tag helpers. And we're going to do input ASP4, last name, and we're going to do the phone, so we'll do input ASP4 phone. And then finally we'll do the email address, so we'll do input ASP4 email address. Okay. So now we have our form inputs, but we need to also have a submit button. And it looks like I forgot the colon there on that one as well. So okay, so we need to add a submit button so that when the user has something to click on that will submit this form. So I'm going to add another DL and DT, and this is going to actually not have anything. So I'm once again going to use the NBSP, add a space to it on the view, and then we're going to do a DD where we're actually going to add our button type of submit, and I'm just going to say save as the label that we put on this button. So we'll go ahead and save that, and now when we try to submit our customer information, it will be posted to the update customer action on our customer's controller. So let's take a look at the update customer action on our customer's controller. And right now, it's still coded to use this Tom Burke information that we used in an earlier demo. So I'm just going to go ahead and get rid of Tom Burke's information here. And the first thing that I probably need to do is, since the form is going to be submitting a new or an updated customer, I need something to model bind this data to. So I need to add a parameter here of type dim customer. And I'm going to say updated customer. And in order for this to work, I need to go out and find on the database the original customer that's being updated. So I'm going to do a var and original customer. I'm going to set it equal to DB, which again is our I'm just going to scroll up here to show you our AdventureWorks context. Okay, so in our AdventureWorks context, I'm going to go to the dim customer table, and I'm going to get the first or default customer whose customer key, and again, this is the way we uniquely identify a particular customer out of the database, where their customer key matches the updated customer key. Now, there's one problem with what we're doing here, and that is where on the updated customer that's being model bound to do we get the customer key? Because right now, if we look at our form, the only values that are being passed back to the form are for first name, last name, phone number, and email address. So where is it supposed to get the customer key from? Well, that's where hidden fields come in extremely valuable. So I'm going to add, as part of our form, a new input. And the input type is going to be hidden. That means that the user will not actually see this on their browser. It's going to exist in the code. So if the user were to open up the HTML, they'd see this input tag, but it's not going to be a text box. It's not going to be something that's editable for them in the actual browser. We're going to say input type is hidden, and we could still use the ASP4 and set it equal to the customer key. Now that way, when the user submits this form, it will also include the customer key that was originally set on the form when we opened up this get customer view. Remember, we were passing in a customer, and one of this hidden input will be assigned that original customer key value. And then when we go to submit it, it will once again submit this information along with that customer key. Now, another thing that I should point out here is that the dim customer table has a lot more information on it here than first name, last name, phone number, and email address. So there's a lot of stuff here that that I'm not actually submitting as part of this update customer. So it really makes a lot of sense, rather than trying to go and submit the entire update customer to our database, we need to go find the original customer in the database and then just make the appropriate changes to the values that were being passed into this updated customer parameter. So now I'm going to do original customer first name is going to be equal to now whatever was in updated customer first name. And we'll do the same thing for last name. And original customer phone is equal to updated customer phone. And original customer email address is now equal to the updated customer email address. So that way, whatever the user changes on the form, it's going to set it for any one of those 4 fields. And now that we've done that, we need to go ahead and call the DB save changes. Okay? And what's really nice about Entity Framework is that it's keeping track. When we did this, when we went out and grabbed that customer from our dim customers DB set and put it on our original customer, Entity Framework is doing this change tracking where it's tracking any changes that might happen to this original customer object, and all of those changes are being stored, essentially. They're being tracked until I call the save changes method, and then it saves it. So I don't need to really worry too much about how I'm getting to the data. All I need to do is make the changes and then save the changes. Now, once I'm done saving the changes, the update customer method is expecting some sort of result to be returned back. So it needs to be an iAction result. We need to do a return then of something. And I'm just going to do this, a redirect to action. And this redirect to action, it probably makes sense that I could just redirect it back to our get customer method. So essentially we're going to be redirecting the user right back to where they started, where they were editing the customer information. So I'm going to do get customer, and I need to pass in a route value. Now that route value needs to be the customer key. And something I like to do quite frequently is I could just do something like, pass in the updated customer key. And you could certainly do that, but I find that it's much better if you do a new anonymous object and pass that in, because now I can define that customer key parameter should be assigned the value that comes from the updated customer key. Okay, it's just a good idea, I think, in general, to use anonymous objects, because one way or the other, it's going to do the model binding when it tries to associate this object to this set of parameters inside of our our get customer method. It's going to model bind to that customer key from an object or from an individual value, so it doesn't really matter. So that's just kind of why I like to make it a new anonymous object. Let's take a quick break. What's this guy doing? He's like fully clothed with a boogie board? What the? What? Oh my god. His pants even dropped down. Oh my god. Now that's all fine and good for what we call the happy path, where everything that the user submitted in this new updated customer is perfectly fine and there are no problems. But what about the sad path? What about if things are not right? Well, we need to add an if statement where if the model state is valid, okay, if it's valid, then we want to go ahead and do those things here where we add the customer to the database. But if it's not, okay, if things are not valid on this, then we still want to redirect back to the get customer. At least this is what I think we should do. You could do whatever you want, but I think I should redirect back to the get customer, but just the view. And the reason is because the view is going to take a type of dim customer. And let's say, for example, our users entered in a first name, a last name, phone number, email address, and there might be 20 or 30 fields on this form. And what if the user got one thing wrong? Okay, what if they got one thing wrong? And so all the stuff that they might have changed inside the form, if we just did a redirect back to the get customer, it's going to go and retrieve all the data from the database again and fill in the form with everything that's in the database. So everything that the user did to make changes is lost. And we don't want that. We don't want the changes that the user was attempting to make to get completely lost because of some sort of programming logic. So rather than actually calling the get customer action, I can directly call from our update customer method. I can just do a return view, and I can name the view that I want to return. That would be get customer. So I'm not getting the get customer action, I'm calling the get customer view. And now I'm going to pass into the get customer view, since it takes a model of type dim customer, I can pass along the same values that were being passed into our update customer model, or update customer method. So I'm just going to copy that and I'm going to paste it there. So now we're passing into our get customer view whatever the updated customer information is that the user sent along with the update customer method. Now, for those of you with a keen eye, you may have noticed that the get customer method, or the get customer form, has the ASP anti-forgery token that I was talking about earlier, and also a form by default submits with a post action, okay, an HTTP post. So I need to, on this update customer method, add a couple of attributes. The first one being HTTP post, and this will help identify that this update customer method will only be allowed to be called if the action is of a type post. So this form must be using a type post. Now you could change that if we did, I think it's called method, right? Method equals, and we could change it to a get or a post. You could also do it to a delete or put, but that actually is kind of broken. So I'm going to do method post if I wanted to be more explicit. But really the default is to be posted. So I can just leave it like that. I don't need to specify that method type is post. But I can say here that the attribute on this update customer means that it must be a type of post action in order for the update customer method to be called. And the other thing was, again, like I said, the anti-forgery token is going to be passed on. And the way you check that anti-forgery token is you add the validate anti-forgery token attribute. And this attribute will cause the MVC framework to just go and check this anti-forgery token that would be passed along with the form data to make sure that it is a valid submission. So something else you might need to think about here is that if we are returning a view of get customer where the data is incorrect, we should probably add some sort of indication to the customer or the user of our application that there was something wrong and what went wrong. So I could add some validation messages for each one of our inputs, but really I'm just going to do a summary here. I'm just going to do a span. I'm going to use the style attribute to say color is going to be red, and this changes the text of the font inside of the span tag to be red. And then I'm going to say HTML, and actually I probably don't even need to do that because I think I'm putting a span tag inside of a span tag, but I just feel like being doubly sure. I'm pretty sure HTML helper does create its own red color. So you know what? I don't need the span tag now that I think about it. Just drop that. Okay, so HTML, and it's going to be the validation summary. And this will give us a summary of what happened with the validation. So if the model state is invalid, that means it's going to pass the updated customer data back to the get customer view, and the validation summary will look inside of the model state to see what was wrong and give us the error messages. Okay, so I think we're all set there, and we should be good to go as far as updating a customer. We should be able to submit it from our get customer view. We have our inputs all set up there to go with our save button. That will call the update customer method, pass in our updated customer, and then return either a redirect back to the customer, or we will get a just a view of get customer with the original wrong data being passed back in, so that our get customer view can redisplay what the changes were that the user entered. Okay, so let's go ahead and run this, and now we'll go to the customers list, and let's take a look at Mr. John Yang. So we'll look at his data, and now we can see there's our input boxes. So we have John Yang, phone number, and email address. And if we just want to change this from John to, I believe originally it was John, and I think I just forgot to change it back at some point. If we save it to John, you can see John Yang. So we've made the appropriate changes. And if we go back just to our customer list, we should now see that it's John without the H. So we could change it back if we wanted to add the H. Save it. Now it's John Yang. And if we go back to our customer list, see John Yang with an H. So that looks like it's working just fine. Now, what about creating a new customer? Maybe that's something we should think about here. So what I'm going to do is I need to go back to our customers controller, and I'm going to go to our create customer method. And right now we can see that it is creating this Tom Burke, and I don't need that anymore. So let's go ahead and get rid of that. And now our create customer method here, we should probably think about how this is going to work, because first we need to show the customer or the user a view that will allow the user to submit the information about the new customer. So it needs to be some sort of form. And so we actually need two actions, because we need one that is going to display the form and another one to accept the submission of the form. So I'm actually going to create two create customers, and I'm going to rename that so it has a capital C. That just seems proper. And the first one is going to be a get. So I'm just going to be explicit. I don't have to be, but I do want to be explicit that this is going to be the get version of the create customer method. And all it really needs to do is return the view, which is going to be our form. So I'm going to go to our customers folder in our views and add a new item, MVC view, and this is going to be called create customer. Now, there's a couple of ways that we could do this, and I'm going to show you probably the most effective way I think that there is to do this. Rather than just using a view and then on this view, let's add our form. Form. ASP controller equals customers. Okay, we know that. And our action, we already said, is going to be create customer. So that's the method that we're going to submit this data to. And again, we need to use the anti-forgery token. So we just want to be explicit about that. And again, that happens by default. So if you forget, don't worry. Now, this form that we want to create is essentially going to be the same as what we had in our get customer. And I know this is kind of taboo here. I'm just going to copy all of this and put it inside of our create customer method. And I know copy and paste is bad, but for right now, I think it's going to be okay for our situation. But you'll notice that these ASP4s, they don't have a model because we don't really have a model at this point, right? Since we're creating a customer, we're leaving it blank. Now, we could just change all these to just be name, and that would be sufficient. That would actually create, that would use these inputs as model binding to those names for each one of the properties. But to me, I'm thinking back to what we did with our get customer view, and how if the user messed up in some way and didn't submit it properly, then there was we wanted to redirect them back to this. And the only way that this form still worked was if we submitted the customer data that the user entered as the model data for the view, right? So we actually do need a model directive as our create customer. So I'm going to go ahead and add the model directive, and this is going to be of type dim customer. So now that's all fine and good, but what do we do then for if we're starting out with a brand new customer that doesn't exist yet? What do we do for this view? Because how do we pass in a customer to this create customer view if there isn't one to pass in? Well, we're going to create one, and it's just going to be empty. So I'm going to do a new var new customer is equal to new dim customer. And now I'm just going to pass in new customer to the view. And that way we create a customer. When the create customer method is called, we create the customer and we pass it into the view. Now that's going to open up our new customer view, our create customer view. What about the submission? We need to have a method that accepts the submission of the form. So we're going to do an HTTP post. HTTP post. There we go. And once again, we need to validate the anti-forgery token. And this is going to be a public iAction result. We're going to call this again create customer. And even though the method names are the same, okay, and we can even see it already defines a member called create customer. The difference here is going to be that the signature is actually going to be slightly different for HTTP post because this create customer should be model binding to the submission that we have here, right? So we actually have some model binding going on here, which is going to change the signature for this particular create customer method. So this would be new customer. And now we no longer get that particular error that was saying that it already exists. Now we have a different one that says not all code pass return a value, but that's fine. We just haven't coded that part yet. So now we have a new customer to add to the database. So let's go ahead and let's first check to see if the model data is good. We always want to do that. Model state is valid. And if it is, then we want to go ahead and submit this to the database. So we'll go ahead and do DB and dim customer add. And what we're adding is, you can see dim customer entity. So we need to add the entity here, which is our new customer that comes in as the model bound parameter. And then we want to do DB save changes. Now, there's one thing we should probably just double check about this, because the model state isn't doing this check for us right now. And it's kind of unfortunate. I wish that it was working, but it's not in our particular example. And that is one of the fields that we have on our dim customer table. The customer alternate key does not allow for nulls. But when we're creating our customer here, we're not submitting it, right? We're not using our customer alternate key. And the model state, for some reason, is not picking it up. I think it's because it doesn't have the appropriate attributes like required and such. Let me just take a look at the entities here. Our dim customer. Yeah, see, we don't see customer alternate key having required. Now, I could put the required on here, right? I could put the required on here, and again, I don't know why it didn't pick it up and do that for us, Hopefully they fix that in later versions. But for right now, just to get around this little particular problem, I'm going to create a randomized customer key here. So I'm going to do new customer, and I'm going to say the alternate key, customer alternate key, is equal to, and just to make this different, I'm going to add an AW, which if you looked at the dim customer table, you'll find that all of them start with AW for the for that customer alternate key. So I'm going to do plus, and now I'm going to do a new random next. Oops, next. Is that right? No, I forgot the. There we go. Okay, next. And this next, let's see, the top end that we want, the max value, let's just do 13,000 for right now. Probably doesn't really matter. In fact, I could change this to 15,000. It wouldn't make a difference. But I do need to make this a toString. So I'm converting this number to a string and append it to the end of that AW, and then assign that AW and that random number to the customer alternate key. That will satisfy, that'll create a randomized alternate key that will go into our customer alternate key. And that's really not quite appropriate, because really we should be getting, the customer alternate key is supposed to match up to the customer key, but we're not, I don't know how this is supposed to work in their mind. If I don't have a customer key yet, I don't have a customer key assigned to that value, how am I supposed to enter it in the customer alternate key field? It just doesn't make a heck of a lot of sense the way they've set up the database. And maybe you could file a formal complaint to Microsoft, but I'm not going to. Okay, so now that's the happy path, right? So we've saved our changes. And actually, I do need to figure out what we're going to do after it's done, because we need to do some sort of return. And the return, if we have a proper created customer, is we could probably just redirect them back to the get customer, right? Or we could just return just the view, but I think it makes sense to go ahead and just call the get customer action. So I'm going to do a redirect to action, and the action name is get customer. And now for the route values, so again, I'd like to use an anonymous object here, and the customer key is going to be equal to, now this is where it gets a little tricky if you don't know about this. When you add a customer to the database and then you save the changes, one of the nice things about Entity Framework is that when the database goes and assigns a new value for that customer key, right? Because our customer key, primary key here, is auto incremented, right, by 1. So it will go ahead, and when we call the save changes, it will add that new ID to the new customer that was being submitted. So luckily for us, that means that it's as simple as doing this: new customer, customer key. We don't have to go back, reach into the database, try to find the customer based upon some sort of criteria. Entity Framework is nice enough that when we call the save changes, it puts that ID that gets created for it from the SQL server and puts that ID value into this new customer variable. So that helps us out a lot when we want to go and do something like this. Now, what about the sad path? What if it doesn't work? Well, we kind of talked about this. We want to return a actually, instead of a redirect, we want to return a view that is going to be the create customer view, and we're going to pass along the new customer. Okay, and that's it. So that's good for that. And once again, our create customer should probably have, similar to our get customer, we should probably add the validation summary so that if there was an improper submission, we would know about it. Now, for those of you who are really, really savvy, you might have noticed that the create customer view and the get customer view are now pretty close to identical, right? The only difference really is this hidden customer key and the update customer. So I could probably reuse this get customer view and maybe make it a partial view or something like that. But I'm going to let you guys refactor that out. You're going to need to think about some of the ways that you're going to code, because you do have different actions here, right? You have an update customer for one action and a create customer for another action. So just think about how you're going to handle that particular thing. And that's just kind of maybe a little homework assignment for you guys to try to go figure out. What do I need to do in order to make maybe one partial view for both the update customer or the get customer view and the create customer view? Now I'm going to go ahead and save this, and I do need to also add, since I have a link to get to the customer for each one of my customers, I also need a link somewhere in my index view that's going to take me to the create customer. So I'm going to add it up here at the top, and I'm going to make this nice and big. I'm going to make it an H3 tag, call it create customer. And this needs to be another action link. So we'll do or an anchor tag, excuse me. So we'll do ASP controller is equal to customers, and our ASP action is going to be create customer. And we don't have any route values to pass in, do we? So that should be good. I'm just going to take that create customer, put it there, get rid of the space, and okay. So let's go ahead and run our application here, and let's create our customer. Okay, so let's go take a look at the list of our customers, and our index view should come up, and now we should have the create customer link. There it is right there. So we'll go ahead and click on create customer, and that takes us to a form. I'm just going to go ahead and do Steve Bishop 555. We'll do that one there, and I'm going to say somewhere at rainbow.com, and I'm going to click on save. And now we're back to the get customer view, and we now have a customer key of 30487 for this new customer called Steve Bishop. So I'm just going to copy this and show you guys that if we went back to our index view here, and just so that we can kind of start fresh, I could once again do get customer key, and set it equal to that 30487, and we once again get our Steve Bishop entry. So there you go. That is how you can use your views, kind of intermix your views, how you can kind of create a workflow, if you will, between your views. And there's one other action here that would be the delete, right? Where we have our customers controller that has the delete on it, okay? Now, I am going to leave that up to you guys, but I'm going to also solve it myself, and I'm going to put it in the work files. So you guys can, on your own, take this delete customer method and figure out where on your views. Do you want to put it in the index view? Do you want to put it in the get customer view? Where do you want to put the delete action? Where can it be called from? And then what do you need to do with the code inside of this delete customer method? Okay, so what are some of the changes? And like I said, I'm going to actually do this for you off screen, and I'm going to put it in the work file so you guys can compare your own code versus what I do. So there you guys go. If you have any questions about this video, please feel free to leave me a comment in the comment section below this video. If you enjoy this video, please don't forget to like it, and don't be afraid to give me that subscribe so you guys can get more information about my videos and see some of my other stuff and get notified when a new video gets posted. And don't forget to favorite some of these things, maybe add some of them to your own playlist so that you guys can keep track of your own videos and maybe rewatch them a little bit later. And until you guys see me at the next video, I hope you guys have a wonderful rest of your day, and thank you so much for watching.